Hermione's Song, Chapter 4, Hogsmeade. The doctor smiled at Tonks' look of amazement at the short trip the TARDIS had taken. He briefly wondered how she would react to knowing the old girl had been to, and actually through, the end of the universe. "All right, how do we get to the school of yours?" he asked. Tonks pointed to the other side of the village.
"We can either take a boat or a carriage,"
she replied. Her eyebrows furrowed in thought.
"Even though the boats are usually reserved for first-year students. We could probably make an allowance for you if you would like to travel by water rather than land,"
she offered. The doctor gave a cryptic grin to Tonks. "A carriage will be just fine, thank you. It's been a very long time since I was a first-year student," he said. "Besides, my experiences with the Titanics have left me a little nervous about traveling over water." "You didn't name any of the boats Titanic, did you?" he asked, rambling. Before Tonks could answer, the doctor muttered to himself, completely lost in his thoughts. "Although, I'm not wearing that tuxedo. I wonder if that would make any difference," he asked no one in particular. Tonks opened her mouth to speak, but she couldn't think of anything to say for a moment. She held up a finger to motion the doctor to be quiet for a moment while she tried to process what he said.
"Professor Dumbledore and the doctor should get along famously. I haven't the foggiest idea what either of them are talking about half the time,"
she thought.
"No boats, got it,"
she said.
"That leaves the carriages,"
she told him, pointing the way. As they walked through the village, Tonks kept stealing quick glances at the doctor. He was looking at everything around him with interest, his head constantly in motion. She could tell that a part of it was him making tactical evaluations of his surroundings, but mostly his gaze just seemed to play over everything for curiosity's sake. Tonks decided to play tour guide for the strange cat.
"Over there is Scrivenshaft's, the quill shop, and next to it is Gladrags, a clothier shop,"
she pointed out. She kept up a running dialogue as they walked through the village, pointing out the various shops as they went. Once they passed the shops, Tonks and the doctor came to the Hogsmeade post office. The large building was painted gray, like almost every other government building galaxy-wide. Owls were busy flying in and out of the opening in the walls on the second floor. A group of boys standing just in front of the post office drew the doctor's attention. "They finally came!" one of the boys said enthusiastically. He tore open a package and started passing around a bag of candy. One of the boys popped a morsel in his mouth and suddenly made a very sour face, like he had bitten into a lemon. He took a step back from the others and started sprouting large yellow feathers. In a matter of seconds, he had transformed into a huge yellow canary. The other boys howled with laughter and popped the tart yellow candies in their own mouths. Soon, there were 3 ridiculously proportioned birds standing on the side of the street. The doctor watched curiously and pulled out his sonic screwdriver to take a reading. When Tonks saw him aim his wand at the boys, she rushed forward and pushed his arm down.
"Doctor, I'm not sure where you've been, but around here it is considered rude to pull out your wand and just start pointing it at people," she
chastised him. The doctor gave Tonks an odd look and pocketed the screwdriver without taking a reading. He thought about what she had said and started chuckling softly. "You know, I said something very similar to my good friend Jack a while ago," he mused. Tonks held up her hands, not wanting him to go any further with that particular story.
"Come on, Doctor. We're not far from the carriages. They're just on the other side of the train station," she told him.
The Hogsmeade train station was bustling with people. The doctor noted that once the train finally arrived, more people were getting on it to leave than there were getting off. All of the people, both coming and going, looked weary from having to be always on their toes. Tonks and the doctor made their way through the crowd and eventually came upon the carriages. The doctor gasped in delight and ran to the animals pulling the carriages. "Look at you, you gorgeous creature," he said to the 4-legged animal with the jet-black coat. The animal was attached by reins to the carriage. The creature appeared to have the body of a very long-legged horse with giant black bat wings sprouting from its back. When the animal turned to face the doctor, he noticed the head was almost reptilian in nature, with a jaw structure that indicated a diet of mostly meat. The doctor couldn't resist and reached out to pet the creature. With his left hand on the beast's muzzle, he gently stroked the long neck, earning him an approving, if somewhat sibilant, whinny from the creature. A few people still waiting on their bags looked at the doctor with sad understanding in their faces. The doctor sensed he was being watched and turned around to look at the people, his right hand still on the creature's neck. "I've gone and done something remarkably stupid again, haven't I?" he asked Tonks. Tonks wasn't the least bit surprised that the doctor could see the animals.
"Only someone who has seen death can see a thestral, Doctor," she explained.
She motioned towards the people.
"I'm willing to bet that lot over there has been lucky enough to only see you petting an invisible animal," she said sadly.
Like the doctor, She had no problem at all seeing the magnificent winged horses. Seen death? The doctor asked. He turned his face to the thestral, and Tonks was barely able to make out what he was saying. I ought to invite the bloke over for Sunday tea, considering how often I've seen him. He paused in mid-stroke on the animal's neck, and suddenly turned to face Tonks. I'm sorry. I must be having problems hearing in my old age. I could have sworn you said these were called thestrals, he said. Tonks nodded her head.
No, you heard me right. They are called thestrals,
she confirmed. The doctor looked very confused and kept glancing from the animals to Tonks. But that isn't possible. Thestrals are mythical creatures, he told her. Tonks gave the doctor an indulgent smile.
Magical, not mythical, Doctor. There is a difference. A mythical creature would be something like an honest politician, she said with a smirk.
Magic? The doctor repeated. He froze in place while his memory ran backwards at an amazing speed. He mentally reviewed the images of the past day, pausing at certain scenes. The first scene he reviewed was the one where the boys turned into canaries. His memory flashed a little further back, and he saw a spoon turning itself in a black metal cauldron in one of the shop windows. Scenes fled past his inner eye, and he replayed the fight in the ice cream parlor. In his mind, he heard the Death Eater shout, Confringo! And Tonks shouting,
Expelliarmus!
With the resulting actions caused by their words. The doctor's smile returned with full force when he came back to the present. Magic! He exclaimed happily, clapping his hands once, and then rubbing them in anticipation. The doctor knew that magic was still possible in the universe. To his knowledge, the vast majority of it had been banished near the dawn of time by his own people, but some remnants had held over. He had been forced to deal with Morgaine, or at least Hester Prynne believing that she was Morgaine. He still wasn't clear on that. Trying to reawaken the land with magic and werewolf blood, not to mention that whole business with the water elemental in New Orleans, and the rituals everyone had been trying to perform to trap it. Except for isolated incidents like those, pretty much the only magic left in the universe was what he referred to as word science, the shaping of energy through sound and intent. What really confused him was the fact that except for William Shakespeare, no human had ever had the ability to control word science, and even the wordsmith had a little help from the Carrionites. The doctor jumped in the carriage, excited about the prospect of learning something new. Come along, Tonks. Why are you dawdling? He inquired. Tonks shook her head and climbed in after the doctor. The doctor kept sticking his head out the window to gawk at the thestral pulling their carriage up the path to the castle. He pulled his head back into the carriage and sat back down, if only for a brief moment. His boundless energy had him hopping from one window to the next to see all the gorgeous scenery. He wasn't ready to discuss the other reason for why he was so intrigued with this magic of theirs. The creature pulling their carriage was definitely not supposed to be there, magical or not. Thestrals weren't creatures out of Earth legends. They were creatures from Galfreyan mythology. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Hermione walked through the courtyard of the school in a huff. She had gone to watch Ron and Harry practice Quidditch, but left before they started. Once again she had witnessed Ron and Luna snogging. Hermione was forced to ask herself what she saw in the ginger boy, and if it was worth it to try to become more than friends with him. Commotion on the other side of the courtyard drew Hermione's attention. She could see a small group of Slytherin led by Draco Malfoy surrounding her friend Neville. She ran to help Neville, but was cut off by a carriage pulling into the school. Hermione sighed loudly in frustration, and changed course to go around the carriage. When she was even with the back of the carriage, she saw the doors fly open, and a man with light brown hair and an old robe open at the front jump out. Hermione thought the man might be a few years older than her friend Tonks. Hermione passed the carriage and made her way to Neville, who was being pushed from Slytherin to Slytherin. The newcomer had a sizable lead on her and reached Neville first. No one here to save you now, Longbottom. No Potter, no stupid Weasley, and no filthy mudblood here to protect you, Draco sneered. Just like there was no one there to save your parents while they begged for mercy, he taunted. Neville ground his teeth in rage and threw a clumsy punch at his Slytherin tormentor. Draco easily pushed the punch aside and used Neville's unbalanced stance and momentum to throw him to the ground. After Neville hit the ground hard, he turned his head to glare at Draco, tears in his eyes. His humiliation was complete when Professor Snape pushed Crabbe and Goyle out of the way. "What is the meaning of this, Longbottom?" Snape demanded. "You should be expelled for such acts of wanton violence," he sneered. Snape was about to say something else when he was interrupted by a man wearing Muggle clothes under a second-hand robe. "I think you have it backwards," the doctor said warmly. "From where I was standing, I clearly saw these boys shoving this poor lad. It's understandable that he tried to defend himself," he said, defending Neville. "Of course, I don't condone violence, but sometimes your hand is forced." he said sadly. Snape glared at the doctor. "Whoever you are, you have no right to interfere with either the students or faculty of this school," he spat. The doctor looked genuinely surprised. "Sorry about that. Sometimes I forget things like social customs. I'm the doctor," he said, holding out his hand. Snape refused to shake it, and the doctor slowly put his hand back down to his side. Snape spared a condescending glance at Neville. 50 points from Gryffindor for wanton violation of the school's no-fighting policy," he said loudly. A cruel smile played over Snape's face. "And another 5 points for being so obviously clumsy, Mr. Longbottom," he added, showing that he had also seen what really happened. The doctor had no idea what the point system was for, but he knew injustice when he saw it. He took a purposeful stride forward and stood nose to nose with Snape. "I don't know who you are, but I think it's fair to warn you that one of the things I despise most in this universe is a bully," he said, looking directly into Snape's eyes. "They're right up there with an uncomfortable pair of socks. Trust me, scratchy foot covering can really ruin a day," he told the group. Snape used the opportunity of the doctor looking him in the eyes to use his skills as one of the foremost practitioners of legilimency in Europe. Snape sent his thoughts out to force his way into the doctor's mind. After less than a second, Snape took an involuntary step backwards and grabbed his temples in pain. The pain forced the head of Slytherin to go down onto one knee to keep from falling over. He looked up at the doctor, fear evident in his eyes. The doctor stuck out the index finger of his right hand and tapped Snape gently above the bridge of his nose, releasing him from the pain. "That was the only warning you will ever get from me," he said ominously. "I don't appreciate people trying to poke around in my head uninvited," he warned, tapping his right temple. "For starters, it's just plain rude. Not to mention how extremely dangerous it is for anyone foolhardy enough to try to get in. Way too much up there. It would wash over you and destroy your sense of self," he explained. Snape looked around and saw all the students around him staring with their mouths open. "Don't you have somewhere else to be?" he snarled. The boys with the green ties took the hint and scampered off. Snape rose, swaying slightly. As soon as the courtyard stopped spinning, he shouldered past the doctor with a flourish of his robe. As Snape left, the doctor offered his hand to Neville to help him up. After he helped the boy to his feet, the doctor put a hand on either side of Neville's face. He turned the boy's head from side to side and looked up his nostrils. "No permanent damage," he said, and let go of Neville's face. Thank you," Neville stuttered. The doctor brushed some dirt off Neville's robes. "You really should have stood up for yourself from the beginning," he said. Reading the boy's face, the doctor quickly added, "I'm not suggesting you should have popped that blonde kid in the nose right from the start, mind you. Just the opposite." The doctor again tapped the side of his head. "You need to outsmart those who want to impose their will on you. Use their own aggression against them," he said wisely. "There are very, very few times when violence is the only answer. Look at me. I've got more enemies than you can possibly imagine, and I refuse to carry a weapon," he said proudly. The doctor's smile was infectious, and Neville returned it. "Now that's the face of a boy who won't allow himself to be bullied any more," he told his new friend. The doctor jerked his head to the side. "Go on. You probably have classes or something to get to," he offered, giving Neville an excuse to leave and get a hold of himself once more. "Thank you again, Doctor," Neville said with much more confidence than he had earlier. He jogged off to the castle to tell his friends what had happened. Hermione couldn't help the smile that snuck up on her. The only other person that she had seen who had such a great combination of courage and kindness was Harry, and she would follow him to the very gates of hell. Her smile got a little wider as she realized that the newcomer was just as handsome as Harry. They even shared a tendency to have unkempt hair. All thoughts of Ron were cast away as she thought,
"Now if he is into books as well as being kind and brave, I might just have to marry this man."